Good? All right. All right, welcome everyone. We're going to talk about utilizing DNS to discover malware inside of your network, specifically looking inside your DNS logs or packet captures. So again, the title is Another Log to Analyze because just one more too. My name is Nathan Magniez. I'm a senior instructor with the Art of Exploitation, powered by telecommunication systems. My background is primarily in penetration testing, red teaming. I've done some IR work as well. It's not as much fun as causing the mayhem as it is to respond to it. Right now, I also am involved with Hackers for Charity and their Food for Work program as well. Stop by them and give them a few bucks, buy a T-shirt. All right, so let's go into malware. We're talking about basically everyone knows malware is constantly evolving. The means to evade detection. What we're here to talk about primarily is not specifically a product or anything like that. We're going to talk about utilizing those DNS logs. What other things we can do once those products, if and when they do fail you. All right, so DNS logs are commonly an overlooked asset when assessing if malware has infected your network. The purpose of this talk, we're going to go ahead and talk about establishing a DNS query and response baselines for your entire network. We're going to analyze NXDOMAIN responses and what those are and why they're important for this. Analysis of successful DNS lookups, and then specifically identifying domain name anomalies. All right, so generically speaking, malware, user clicks something because, you know, us as a security person would never click something right and get malware infected on our machine. A user clicks something, he becomes a bot instead of a botnet, and that bot has to communicate out to its command and control servers, right? We'll call them C2 from now. They could use IP addresses, but that's pretty much not how they're working anymore. They're going to use fully qualified domain names because if that IP gets blacklisted, then they're screwed. So they're going to go ahead and use a fully qualified domain name specifically to go ahead and communicate out to that network. So DNS is necessary for that because DNS is going to translate that host name into an IP address. That way the bot can communicate to its botnet or malware command and control server. It's extremely useful for users because you don't want to have to remember an IP address. More importantly, it's more helpful for attackers because then they don't have to just rely on one single IP. They can hide behind multiple IP addresses. If one gets blown out of the water, they can just rotate through either with fast flux, dynamic DNS to go ahead and point it to its other command and control server somewhere in Kirkplakistan. Generically speaking, here's pretty much what it looks like. Infected box querying out. He needs to talk to his C2 server, gets his C2 address, comes back, starts communicating and serving up the malware or doing whatever he is, either DDoS or something like that. So we can go ahead and start to look at some of the packet captures and firewalls to give you IP addresses. Specifically speaking, DNS queries, DNS servers, they don't keep track of queries or responses, and you don't really want them to because it's going to go ahead and degrade its services. It's going to severely impact the performance of that DNS server. So we're going to go ahead and want to go ahead and do packet captures because that's going to be a little bit better for our DNS server because we don't want the DNS server to go down. So go ahead and run a packet capture. Here's just a generic example of a bind log. In var syslog are queries. We queried for example.com, facebook.com, or skype.com, but we don't have any responses in there. So we don't know if it was actually successful or not. Those all look pretty legit right there, but if you're looking through lots of them, it's hard to tell whether or not it was actually successfully resolved. Here we have another example. Again, you're going to want to go ahead and do packet captures to go ahead and capture everything that you need to start to analyze for the malware in your network. So some basic rules to live by with packet captures. Capture everything. Don't use filters. Use a view filter basically to, a display filter to go ahead and show you what you're looking for later on. You don't want to miss something because you put in a wrong packet capture and then you don't have that those packets in there, or because you filtered them out. Put them in appropriate locations again, and also stay on the correct side of the law, aka I'm not a lawyer, so go ahead and talk to yours to make sure it's legal to do so. Also expect to utilize a significant amount of disk resources, especially if you're just doing a blind packet capture. So you're going to have something that's going to store these packets somewhere, and you're going to have to determine whatever it is for your network, how much space that is, and how long you need to store it for. All right, so we know malware uses fully qualified domain names to contact their C2 servers. Now, what can we do about it? Well, specifically here, we're going to talk about some defensive techniques. And the first one I have is named Kill It With Fire. So just block HTTP access for your users, but that might start a riot. You know, users aren't going to like that. So let's go ahead, blacklist the FQDNs, the malicious ones. That might work, but it's not the total solution of the problem because of something known as DGA. Is anyone familiar with DGA? Domain generation algorithm. Basically, instead of just using a hard set list of IP addresses inside the malware or fully qualified domain names, it's going to go ahead and have its algorithm inside the malware. Basically, the C2 server knows the DGA, and so does the piece of malware. And it's going to go ahead once its command and control server's fully qualified domain names have been black holed, go through a specific algorithm and try about 10 of them, maybe 20. It's going to go out and I'm going to try whatever.com. It's going to hit and miss 9 out of 10, but one of them is going to come back. All right, and that's what we're kind of looking for here. So once it goes and tries that DGA, it sends out a whole bunch of basically weird-looking fully qualified domain names out to be translated. We're going to get some results there in our packet captures in the NXDOMAIN responses. Specifically, utilized this technique in the past, still today. It's being adopted more and more by other types of malware or aka crimeware. Here are some of the top malware families that are using DGA. Specifically, here's a quote from Gunter Ullman. He said, while DGAs are not new, the rate at which they are being adopted and their ability to elude the scrutiny of some of the most advanced malware analysis professionals should be of great concern to incident response professionals. I'm assuming a lot of you are interested in this talk, so it's probably you, right? Cont'd, which was one of the oldest botnets, recently just upgraded its ability to include DGA. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at a case study. Specifically on Facebook. Protecting people on Facebook. Facebook security, yes, they do have a security staff. They're pretty good, actually. Facebook security flagged a suspicious domain in their DNS logs. So again, kind of the same token of what we're talking about here. They're analyzing their logs. They found a suspicious domain. They went ahead and investigated it. They found that it was they tracked it down to an employee laptop, then crucified them. No, they I don't know what they did. They didn't note that in their little note. Yeah. What's that? Yeah. So they tracked it down to an employee laptop, and they found out the actual vulnerability had to deal with Java. Well, of course it was Java, right? It was a 0-day. Always start with Java in incident response. They searched for a malicious file throughout their organizations once they identified what it was, and they went ahead and made Facebook safer. They said it didn't actually affect any of their users. It was actually inside of their corporate network. So they claimed that it didn't actually affect any of the user sets of Facebook. They notified Oracle, confirmed the 0-day, and then they released a patch. Here's a little slide on Java. 3 billion devices run Java. 2,999,999,999 devices wish they weren't. All right. Identifying malicious traffic. We're going to talk about some of these bullets here. Establishing a traffic DNS baseline. We're going to look for malicious domain names. And within that specific DNS traffic, we're going to look for those NXDOMAIN responses and what they are, and then the successfully resolved queries as well. Specifically, also, we're going to analyze the additional traffic of identified suspected machines to see what else they're doing on that system. We're also going to talk about identifying anomalous domain names and how to tell what is suspicious or anomalous domain name. All right, so we need to establish a DNS traffic baseline. That's going to be paramount for this. Basically, what is normal for your environment? It's going to be different for everywhere. So you need to know what's going on in your environment ahead of time. So establish a baseline for the top level domains, so the .coms, the .govs, the .mils, what have you, .edu. The second level domains, who you know your users are going to Facebook every day, they're going to YouTube. That's normal. What's outside of that scope? The top hosts that are performing those lookups, the servers as well, and then those top DNS queries. Per host, if capable. I mean, I don't know how big your environment is, but if it's small enough, you could probably do it per host, at least per network, at least a domain or a site. What is normal also for the HR department? Where are they supposed to go every day? What about the IT department? They may go to more quote-unquote malicious sites, right? Or the security department. Well, they're probably the ones doing the research, actually, so the analyzing of the log. So we want to see what is the peak time of day as well for these queries. So if you start seeing a spike at 2 a.m., that's a little abnormal as well. All right, so I mentioned NXDOMAIN responses before. Anyone familiar with what that is? All right, so I query for a bad, fat-fingered domain name, and it comes back, couldn't resolve. It's going to get you an NXDOMAIN response. Basically, it didn't resolve successfully. It's typically a result of a fat finger, or it could be DGA, basically. Like I said before, when the DGA goes out, it's going to send a splurge of different domain names to request to try to contact its C2 server. It's going to go ahead and go out. If it did 10, 9 of 10 will probably fail, and you'll have 1 successful. That's the one we need to identify as well. But those 9 others should be a clue for us as well, too. All right, so know what is normal, again, for your environment, either hour, daily, weekly, monthly, or per host, VLAN, so on and so forth. More about establishing a baseline for NX domains. This is from Damballa. They did a lot of, when I was doing the research for this talk, I found they did a lot of research as well into using DGA to identify identify malware as well. I took this quote from them. They said 90% of Murphet victims generate more than 10 NX domains per day. Meanwhile, 92% of all devices within the network create less than 10 NX domains per day. Right? So we can start to see how we can establish a little bit of a baseline right there. So if your average NX domain responses for your entire network is 25 per hour, and then you see a spike of 50 coming out of 1 host in an hour, well then that machine is probably hosed, right? Because the amount of NX domain responses on this host is too damn high. So, starting to make sense? All right. Anybody have any questions so far? All right. So we can also query for some malicious domains as well. If we have a blacklist of known malicious domains, we can go ahead and start to look inside of our logs for those too. So some good resources for that include malware domains, malware domain list as well, malware patrol, and Zeus tracker. From that, we can either query them or, better yet, like I said, create a black hole or sinkhole. So some examples up here: malware domains, block lists. Some of the things they have a blacklist or black hole list you can go ahead and pull down. I believe at least weekly, if not daily. Malware domain list is pretty good because you can actually go there. If you're just looking through your logs, go ahead and go to their website and query them specifically and see if they're known or attached to anything. And why that's helpful is it will also tell you specifically what type of exploit it's linked to as well. So that can also give you another indication what to start looking for on that, either that specific machine or throughout your network too. And then there's also malware patrol. Those are all free resources at your disposal. All right, so we can begin to also analyze some of the DNS traffic as well. So there's going to be a lot of information in those DNS logs. Again, like I said before, use a packet capture, but again, that's going to be a lot of information too. So let's focus on specifically that NX domain responses that have been returned to your server or to that machine. This is going to reduce the amount of information you have to go ahead and sort through. So of those, is it normal? Does it look suspicious? Is it within my threshold? Was it the result of a fat finger? These are all things that are going to require your analytical process, right? Of those successfully resolved domains, are there any known malicious ones? Because there's going to be some that actually do go through. So you don't only want to focus on the NX domains, but start there, and then from that, narrow down a host or a group of hosts and start to see which ones of those around the same time period actually resolved. And then, are there any suspicious or anomalous names too? All right, so when identifying anomalous domain names, there's a few different things that make it anomalous. The first one is domain name length. And so, yes, the old adage, size doesn't matter. In fact, it does in this scenario. So typically, a a normal name, a normal domain name will be less than or right around 12 to 15 characters. Or excuse me, typically a normal domain name is less than 12 to 15 characters. Typically they're around 8. This makes it easier for users to remember it, like google.com, yahoo.com, bing.com. Yes. Chrome does? Yeah. So yeah, you might have to take that into consideration then when you're doing some of these some of this analysis, and start to take that into account for and eliminate those. But you say it was totally random?
Yeah, the string's random. You get 4 in a row, 30 times they want.
Okay. Yeah. Just 8 characters. Okay. So like a search. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 So that's where placing your sensors would be critical then too as well. Make sure you have different packet captures going at different locations and maybe syncing as well. As a top-level domain becomes more popular, the available domain names thus become less available. So you're going to see an increase in the .coms or the .eus. So you're going to see some growth there. It's kind of like Viagra for domain name length, the popularity of TLDs. A typical Zeus query, just for reference, is greater than or equal to 33 characters. That's way beyond the scope of what's typically normal, right? However, that might adapt, right? Also, character contents is could be considered in your anomalous approach too. Alphanumeric strings of non-words, just random characters as example, 2K, JP, DSF, on.com. Sometimes they won't fall outside the normal range of numbers for domain name, but that is not a normal domain that any user could memorize easily. Also, doppelganger domains as well, missing the dot between like a third-level domain and a top-level domain, or excuse me, a second-level domain. So here we have like CN, yahoo.com. That's actually from APT1 as well. Has anyone seen that case study, APT1? Similar misspellings, so substituting 1 for an I, or an L, excuse me, like AOL online, but it's a 1 there. That's also from APT1. Yes, they did actually do something that dumb. So missing double vowels or consonants, like facebook.com as well. Things that you may just on a cursory look, just go ahead and glance over. What else makes it anomalous? Well, we can go ahead and start to look at the suspicious top-level domains as well. Are these top-level domains hosted in countries that are known for infosec crime, stuff like that? We're looking at those less common TLDs as well. Not to beat up on foreign domains, but if I see something connected now to .cn or .ru, I'm suspicious right away. So even surfing out to something like that. So. Also, that third bullet down there, countries with no legitimate business ties to your business, right? Does everyone remember the Estonia DDoS attack? One of the ways they began to narrow down their who was attacking them and who was their actual legitimate customers was to go ahead and start to identify which countries have no legitimate connections to us, right? So Estonia had Post-Emez, right? They were getting requests from Brazil and Japan. They probably didn't speak Estonian, so they started to narrow those down. You can use that sort of approach as well to see, hey, I have no business ties in this country. That's suspicious right away from me. So with your security team knowing what the business role is too, not just security, but knowing what your business that pays you to do security does. Does that make sense? All right. So some common tools that we can use at our disposal. As I mentioned, use packet captures to decrease the burden on your domain name servers, because their primary role is to just resolve host names to IP addresses. So we talked about utilizing packet captures, Wireshark, but we're not going to go ahead and talk about those. The ones we're going to talk about at the bottom are dnstop and passive DNS, and they both have their positives and negatives. DNSTop is basically just a libpcap application. It can either read in packet captures, or you can go ahead and use it to go ahead and packet capture. It will go ahead and display tables of the following down there: your source IP addresses, destination IP addresses, the query types that you're using, the response codes, so again, those NX domains that are coming back, the successfully resolved ones, top level domains like we talked about before, second level domains, and so on and so forth. DNSTop supports both IP4 and IPv6 addresses as well. However, it does not support TCP. So specifically out of those two, that list, source IP address and response codes, and then the top level domains was what we pretty much highlighted earlier. Here's just a sample output of what you could see utilizing DNSTop. So your query sources, where they came from, the count, the first level query names in the middle there, the second level query names as well. So you can see from a high level view where my main traffic is being queried out to, or where my users are querying out to, and what's being resolved. The second level domains as well. Query source, and then the second level domain, so you can add some information there too. So you can narrow it down to a specific machine and seeing where they're querying out to. You can go ahead and you can take a PCAP file and push it into it, or you can use it to go ahead and. Yeah, so these are all just screenshots of different examples. There's also passive DNS, which is a free tool as well. Basically, does the same type of deal as DNSTop does, or DNSTop, excuse me. That's the name, top. Passive DNS will sniff traffic. It does the terminal display. What's good about that is it also does TCP as well. So if you're not concerned about TCP, it doesn't really matter. But if you also want to see some information about who's doing like zone transfer requests as well, this might be a tool for you as well. It does logging to standard out, so we can look for the NX domains and other DNS records. There's also a web interface for it as well. So if you're tired of looking at that terminal screen, you can go ahead and start to use a web interface. And here's an example of that. You can sort by specific records as they're listed up there, the A records, C name, all the way down, MX records, so all that sort of information. You can do a special report there. Just show me all my NX domain responses. So it shows you all the NX domains, where they're coming from, and when it saw it. You can also do an advanced search. So if you know a suspicious domain that you're looking for, or you've seen out there, maybe on a blog or something, you can go ahead and throw it in there and see if it's been utilized by one of your users out there. Add in the answer, NX domain, evilmalwaresite.com is our query. When you want to filter that result, that sort of information. Everything that you put in the multiple field will use that logical AND. All right, so like I mentioned before, we also need to analyze the network traffic of the suspect hosts if we have identified any. So having the baseline for network activity is also key here as well. So what connections are they also making, and where to, where from, and what time of day is that occurring? The established past connections, anything that's ongoing with that specific machine that's been identified as a suspect in our investigation. The IP addresses that they're connected to, are they legitimate? Are they malicious? These are all things you're going to have to go ahead and do some whois queries and stuff like that on, and do some more research. Where are they making multiple other connections to websites as well? And can we just go ahead and blacklist that IP address too? Is that IP address also hosting other legitimate domains too? So it could be they're just utilizing, an Amazon server out there. And if you blacklist that whole IP address, then you also screw over a whole other legitimate, another set of legitimate domain names out there too. All right, so once you've identified and successfully tracked down the malware and the attackers or what have you, you need to notify the community. Like I mentioned before, defense is not as sexy as offense. It's much more fun to cause chaos than respond to it, right? Because as an attacker, you know exactly what you're doing. As a analyst, you don't have the ability to know exactly what they're doing. To make matters worse, it's hard, it's tiresome, and defenders commonly don't want to share this information of being attacked because, one, it may damage the company's reputation, it's embarrassing, etc. But we need to start sharing the knowledge, whether it's anonymously, upload that information somewhere, let others know of what's occurring as well. So update the malicious domain blacklist if you find something that hasn't been reported yet. Go ahead and do that. Takes 2 seconds, maybe longer if you have a slow connection. Your local community, malwaredomains.com, malwaredomainslist.com, the ones I mentioned previously, and notify that domain registrar that they're hosting malware, or that specific domain is hosting malware. All right, and then finally, attributing an attack. Well, that's going to be kind of hard, so good luck with that. Unless you have some of the resources like Mandiant had access to, it's typically not going to be that easy, especially if hackers are using good tradecraft or they're using multiple methods of redirection. It's going to be a little bit harder to do. So that may not be your ultimate task. You may have multiple fires to put out in your organization, so you might want to just focus on putting out that specific fire at that specific time and move on, because malware is probably going to keep happening, right? And that about wraps it up. I think I'm right on my money right here. Some props out there: telecommunication systems. My director, Jeremy Willingham, Aaron Soto, and Christopher Ellison at Tofts. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Actually, just like a comment, maybe some tool that people can use to
Uh-huh.
actually consolidate a lot of things about stuff. Bro IDS.
Bro ideas?
Will do DNS stuff, all consolidated down to one tool, with something like that for whatever you got, free. And you can actually do entropy calculations on DNS requests. Yeah, it says a script to it.
Okay.
So you can actually see ones that are crazy character DNS. So you have a graph.
That makes it a lot easier.
This one has the entropy that is much higher than the rest of the domains that all
Yeah.
people are looking for. So this one, also you can mark all the connections on a given network of every host that you can make.
Okay.
So it's all consolidated stuff that can be output to any kind of log we use and aggregator.
Nice.
It's free and fast.
Yeah.
And just do the two things. This is an excellent piece of software that can take what you do DNSTop
Mm-hmm.
and make it happen.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Go ahead in the back.
Real quick, there are various things that you can do. The DNS analysis being largely human IOS, analysis, or get it largely just automated.
I mean, I'm going to say anything that has to do with analysis is going to need to be human. I mean, you can automate all you want, but ultimately someone's going to learn what the automation is and then try to bypass it. Just like with signature-based sets, going to go around that. It's only as good as it knows about. So it's going to somehow, it's not going to find the 0 day, right? So someone's going to be able to maneuver around. That's just the nature of the game, right? It's cat and mouse. So I would say automate as much as possible, analyze what you can. So, any other questions? All right. Well, be like Good Guy Greg. Go support Hackers for Charity. Anybody want some shirts? Oh, it's open. One more. Got one more. I saw his hand.